Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside the Jaws of Victory, Battle of the Korsun-Cherkasy Pocket, January-February 1944. This is a game designed by Milt Janoski and published by New England Simulations. This is one of those games that I saw on Facebook. I saw in I think it was the Wargamers group. They were talking about it. There's a lot of praise that's heaped upon the New England Simulations group and the games that they make. And I've never played any of their games before. This is East Front, so immediately it caught my attention. And I've heard, like I said, very good things about NES, so I wanted to check this one out. So I'm going into this one sight unseen. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. The Jaws of Victory is a historical simulation of the Soviets' winter offensive in the Ukraine in the early months of 1944 that trapped the better part of 2 German corps and the German army's desperate response to relieve their beleaguered comrades in the pocket. 7 separate scenarios covering the period from January 26 to February 18th, including a 25-turn campaign game, allow both sides plenty of opportunities for offensive and defensive action. As the Soviet player, you begin with a 2-pronged offensive, striking hard at the base of the German salient in an attempt to trap as many German units as possible. If you succeed, you must then turn your attention southward to build the outer ring in preparation for the German counteroffensive, while systematically chewing away at the supply-starved defenders in the pocket. As the German player, you must slow the Soviet drives from both east and west by fighting a 2-front defense, and if possible, bring them to a halt. Once the pocket forms, you must skillfully hang on and preserve as many of the trapped units as possible, and wait for your panzer divisions from the south to carve open an escape route. And both sides will have to contend with overstretched supply lines, bad weather, and tanks stopping mud. It says here for the game components you get 2 full-color 22 by 34-inch maps, 1,170 back-printed half-inch die-cut counters, a rulebook and separate playbook, including 7 scenarios, examples of play, and designer's commentary. The game scale is divisions and regiments, with tank and other support units as battalions. Each game turn is a day. The map, each hex, is 2 miles. It is rated as a 6 on the complexity level, which puts it at the higher end of moderate. And here is an example of the game counters that you'll have, as well as the map. So let's take a look inside and see what you get. We get our combat manuals in a nice binder. Our D6. Looks like everything's pretty tight in here, so I'm going to try to get everything out at one time. Got our, it's like scenario cards and player aids, and these are really nice thick card stock. Some errata. Our counter sheets. And the maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with the game. Beautifully illustrated map. I really love the color palette used for this game, and the graphics that are used on the map, just really, really beautiful to look at. Cherkasy up in the top right, you've got some heavy forest, and then you've got a good amount of swampland once you get out of that. Korsun right there, Zvenigorodka here, and then all the way to the bottom left you have Uman and then Belya Surkov in the top left-hand side. So pretty decent area that you're going to be covering here in the game. Also on the map you have the terrain key in the top right, 8th Army and 1st Panzer Army for the Germans, breakdown boxes and holding boxes. For the Soviets you're going to have the 1st Ukrainian front and the 2nd Ukrainian front. Now we'll take a look at the player aid cards. This is the Soviet player card. This gives you your Soviet replacement point tracks as well as your CAS availability. And then for the Germans they have their Korsun supply track, Uman airfield track, CAS availability, armor replacement, and then the replacement point track here for both the 1st Panzer and 8th Armies. Then we have our combat results table that gives you all of your results, an explanation of the results on the right-hand side, combat strength modifiers and combat ratio shifts, as well as Soviet artillery support and German artillery support tables. And we have our terrain effects chart, which lists out all the different types of terrain on the map and its effects on non-motorized, motorized, and armor units in either frozen or mud, as well as the combat strengths and shifts that will be applied. You also have a bridge destruction table and a collapse table on the right-hand side. And we have the sequence of play card that goes into a great amount of detail on all of the steps for each turn. You have the weather stage, mutual air stage, mutual supply stage, the German air supply stage, and then we start with the Soviet player turn, event phase, movement phase. On the back we go to the combat phase, engineering phase, disorganization, regroup phase down at the bottom. Then we start with the German player turn, event phase, replacement reinforcement phase, movement phase, combat phase, engineering, disorganization, regroup, and breakout phases, and then we have the game turn stage. Then there is another player aid for the combat phase sequence, which breaks down all the sequences when you are conducting combat. And we'll take a look at the scenario cards. This is a brittle sword breaks. This is the Soviet card. There's also a German card. They're going to be almost identical as far as the setup goes. They're going to be identical, but then you're going to have special rules that are going to pertain to that side alone. This is for the Soviets, gives you their special rules, and then any restrictions and special rules by game turn. And then on the backhand side, you're going to have your setup for all of your different armies where they're be located on the map. And same thing for the German. You're going to have your special rules for the Germans and restrictions, special rules by turn. On the backhand side, you're going to have the detailed setup for each of the units on the map. I'm not going to go through all of the scenario cards for both sides. We're just going to look at the Soviet cards. Operation Wanda, the 3rd Panzer Corps counterattacks. The Teuton strikes the 2nd blow, the 1st Ukrainian front attacks. And then Konov springs the trap, the 2nd Ukrainian front attacks. Then we have the game turn record track, which not only gives us the game turn record, but also sequence of play, weather display, and reinforcement schedule for both the Soviets and the Germans. Now we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game. These are really nicely done, nice thick counters, fantastic quality, and I love the art on them for the armor. And there is a lot of data though on these counters, so that's something to keep in mind because these are half-inch counters. They may be a little more difficult to read for us older folks, but definitely look like they're going to make a great presentation on the table. And adding to that, we've got color-coded units as well. German 8th Army is in gray, and the 1st Panzer Army is in light green. These are double-sided counters. Then on the next sheet, we have the last of the German units, as well as some strength markers for both the Germans and the Soviets, some admin counters down here at the bottom. Now we'll take a look at the Soviet units. We have the 1st Ukrainian front in the dark tan, and the light tan is 2nd Ukrainian front. And we finish out the last of the Soviet units, and then have some admin counters on the 4th sheet. And then the 5th and final sheet are more admin counters. Now we'll take a look inside the rulebook. It is a 31-page rulebook. On the inside cover, we have the table of contents listing out all of the different rule sections, the different cases, and the associated page numbers to each rule when you need to reference it. Start off with the introduction, game components, the map, then we get into an explanation of the counters. It continues on over to page 4 and finishes out on page 5, where we get into rules interpretation and the glossary of game terms. On page 6 is where we start with the sequence of play, and it breaks down all of the steps for the sequence of play. It starts on 6, the rulebook goes to 31, so in essence about 25 pages of actual rules. It breaks down the combat units and capabilities here. We've got multi-step units and the explanation of how those work with an illustrated example. Special unit attributes, armor, anti-armor combat, infantry anti-armor capability, Soviet armor brigade, combined arms are some of the examples there. Then you have the unit breakdown and recombination, Soviet division extension, and then we get into German alarm units. We have some illustrated examples here to support what is explained in the rules. We get into weather, combat air support missions, replacements, and it tells you the eligible, ineligible units, special German replacements, movement, the different types of movement and how those are handled, reserve declaration segment, armor interception, Soviet movement adjacent to alarm units, zones of control, zones of influence, how those are handled in the game, along with a couple of illustrated examples. Then we get the stacking convention, combat, all the steps involved in combat, breakthrough, units that can and cannot be attacked, supported, unsupported combat, effects of terrain on combat, effects of ZOCs and zones of influence on combat, combined arms combat shifts, special unit effects, artillery support restrictions, high-low combat ratios, combat resolution, how that's all handled, retreating after combat, advancing after combat, whether you can or cannot retreat, the effects of terrain on advance or retreat, disorganization and regrouping, supply, how supply is handled in the game, and the effects of supply, your supply points, expending those supply points, and again, continues on with more supply here to page 25. Then we've got bridges, repairing them and destroying them, engineers, Soviet minefields, and then you have your German special rules on page 27. Soviet special rules pick up on 28. Then we have German armor reliability, heavy tank bridge collapse, effects of rail movement on supply, fording across rivers, alternative airfield construction, and then more supply information there before we get to the back of the book where it has the multi-step unit examples, unit breakdowns, and armor in combat. Now we'll take a look at the playbook. It is a 27-page book. Inside you'll find steps on setting up, the scenario rules, the scenarios themselves, as well as design and player's notes, and examples of play to close out the book. We've got the introduction, a prelude to the battle that explains the steps leading up to the battle historically. Then you have the setting up the game here, how to set up your pieces, and general scenario rules, And then we get into the scenarios themselves, which we've already seen on the cards. Here it is in the book. And just flip through that real quick. We'll see the different scenarios that you get. Then we have the campaign game from the Jaws of Victory. And then through Hell's Gate, the Breakout. Design and player's notes here on page 18 and 19. That continues on for a couple more pages. Then we get to the examples of play on page 23. And I love it. Illustrated examples of play. I say it all the time. We've got our illustrations. We've got steps as to what's going on in the pictures. Then there's combat explanation here. Combat resolution is all walked through for you, breakthrough segment. And then you get to the engineering portion of it. And then there's references and resources at the back of the book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of the Jaws of Victory, Battle of the Korsun-Cherkasy Pocket, January, February 1944, a game designed by Milt Janowski and published by New England Simulations. I've never played any of the NES games before, but when I saw this one out there, it was East Front, it caught my eye. I was fairly ignorant to NES's games. Somebody told me if you're interested, pick it up now because they only do small print runs, and if you miss out, you're going to totally miss out. It'll be years before it's back in print. So if this video has made you interested at all, don't listen any further. Just go right to New England Simulations website, place an order if there's any copies available yet, because top-notch quality to me is building up my confidence that the rulebook is going to be just as good, and based on everyone else's past experiences that strongly recommended NES games to me. So if you're an East Front fan, definitely check this one out. It looks like it's really going to be a lot of fun to get on the table, but it also looks like I'm going to probably need a convention or a week of time to play solitaire because it plays 2 to 5 players, and the actual game itself can go 6 to 50 hours. So a lot of time will be invested in this game. That's why it will probably be a face-to-face game. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. You have any comments or questions? Post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.